This is CL Discussion 5, Dialogue between Language and Content, recorded on the 6th of May 2009.
Cardiff.
Yeah.
And we had a similar debate 4 years earlier in Cardiff, 2005, and things have changed. People on the panel were Hugo Battens-Beardsmore, Peter Mahisto, David Grell, Sue Hughes, Meena Patel and Anne Malyers, and David Marsh led through the whole debate.
I see.
And participants were invited to give their opinions as well. And if I just sort of summarise, one of the questions was whether people thought that CLIL was the way forward for English language teaching. 75% of people agreed, or strongly agreed. On the question whether CLIL was a management nightmare, people said that they disagreed. Some fully, some said they simply disagreed. And the question whether good CLIL can only be taught by native speakers, 79% disagreed. So that was a clear indication that CLIL is not only for native speakers. And a couple of things which I noted down was that 4 years ago David Graddle seemed to be very, very sceptical about CLIL, and now he seems to have changed his point of view a bit, and he said he thinks that CLIL signals the end of traditional EFL.
I see. It's very interesting.
Hugo Battens-Beardsmore said that the burden should not be carried only by language teachers, but that each teacher is also a language teacher. And I thought that was worthwhile noting down. Meena Patel from Malaysia reported that their CLIL project, which means that maths was taught through English, was less than successful because students were not supported linguistically, were not supported enough.
Yeah. And
Peter Mahisto said that his experiences in Estonia were that not only the students need language support, but that the students' parents also need that kind of support. The language of schooling or academic language also. What I found quite funny was that David Graddle said CLIL means a massive educational change, and politicians actually want successful implementation of CLIL projects within an electoral cycle, which is roughly about 4 years. They can't wait for anything longer. CLIL does take longer, and that was quite funny. Hugo Battens-Beardsmore said that, and I quote him literally, "Creating perfect bilinguals is not the aim of CLIL because perfect monolinguals don't exist." That was nice as well.
Yeah.
I think there was an agreement amongst the people on the panel that the role of the language teacher will change due to CLIL becoming more a coach, a content teacher, and vice versa, of course.
Yeah.
So that's what I sort of what I wrote down. Sort of a quick summary of my notes. Very interesting debate.
Yeah. One of the things I remember noting from my colleagues at Macmillan who fed back about the surveys was that the opinion of the audience actually made a slight change between beginning and ending.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. There were a number of people who had minor reservations, and at the end it seemed as if their opinion shifted over to the more sort of positive side.
Excellent. Let me, if you don't mind, let me tell you about the young learners and teenagers discussion group I led recently on. I think it's on the wave that came of interest with IFL Cardiff and the CLIL panel the young learners and teenagers SIG group in Yahoo groups planned a discussion with myself, John Clegg and Jean Brewster, and it turned out that it was just me because John's not been very well, and Jean actually had technical problems, so she couldn't join us. So I led the discussion myself, and if you like, I'll tell you a few of my notes from that discussion. All of it's available in the archive, of course, because it was all textual within the Yahoo group and is accessible for anybody to read. But I wanted to report back because this focus group, I think, is a great place for us to share the interest from other colleagues, and also I think the concerns from other colleagues. And I got the impression, unlike I think the IHF or CLIL panel at Cardiff, that there's more concern than there is real support amongst our colleagues in the ELT world. And of course at the IHF or Cardiff event there were probably majoritively, if not exclusively, language teachers, and I think that's the case within the young learners and teenagers group, within Yahoo groups as well. And sadly, we seem to get stuck on assessments in our discussion, and rather than reporting back on success stories as well as talking about problems, we got stuck exclusively on talking about assessments, and I don't think I did a great job, colleagues.
Well, I would disagree. Of course, the main focus became assessment, but from what I've read, there is concern. But on the other hand, people are interested in CLIL and they'd like to know more. There was also sort of some worried voices from people who had tried CLIL in one form or another, but in the end it all came down to assessment, and I think that it is an important issue. Yeah,
I mean, I would say, I don't know how the others of you feel about this, it would be great for us to try and deal with this very issue, assessment, in one of our meetings, because I think your own experiences, as well as the fact that we now have contacts with practicing subject teachers, it would be a very good thing for us to dedicate a whole hour just to assessment to see what we come up with.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Do we still have you, Christiana and Lauretta?
I was just reflecting about what we discussed in Barcelona. There was this CLIL seminar in Barcelona.
Oh, tell us about it, please do.
And I was there actually to last week, I think it was last week, and also there the great majority were language teachers, but there was a significant group of subject teachers, and it was really interesting to try to understand which are the most crucial issues developing now in the debate about CLIL. And I think that the focus is now shifting from the language teacher to the subject teacher, and this appeared clearly in the different contributions. And maybe what Peach said about the different role of the language teacher was not discussed, but was implicit in the debate. The fact that the language teacher could develop into being the coach of content teacher. And many contributions were focused on this aspect of the language teacher, and also the experiences described by by school teachers, so not only researchers, but teachers working on the field, reported of positive experiences when the model was a collaborative model based on the interaction between language teacher and subject teacher. So I think could be interesting for many teachers to read the abstracts of the seminars that are available on the website of the seminar.
Yeah. And do you know if that's going to be publicly available?
Yes, the abstracts are already available on the website of the seminars, and there will be a publication of the whole papers, of all the papers presented in the seminar. But the abstracts are still available.
Yeah, that's great. And what I'll do in our notes for this discussion, I'll just make a note to myself about that, is I'll post the web address again so that we can refer to it. Because there has been quite a lot of activity in the last few weeks, hasn't there, on a conference or on a round table scale with a lot of discussion going on in different areas. I've just come back from Brazil yesterday in Sao Paulo, where there was a bilingual conference, national bilingual conference, and the audience was made up of teachers from private schools. That's the main difference, I think, from our background, but it was entirely about integrating content and language. They didn't call it that, it's bilingual education, pure and simple, but interestingly some of the plenaries made reference to CLIL in their discussion of good practice for bilingual education. Not least Jim Cummings in the opening plenary had CLIL up there with his variations on integrating the curriculum with another language, and it's a growing market in Brazil. I think they mentioned a 30% growth in 2 years since the last conference, and still expanding, both at preschool right through primary, junior and secondary. Teachers and parents and children are getting into it more and more in South America.
That sounds really impressive.
Yeah.
I attended a 2-day conference in Luxembourg, which was a conference on Socrates Comenius project, and the project has been going on for 2 or 3 years, and the aim is to come up with a model for teacher education, which is a bottom-up sort of model, because it's based on classroom observation and then research into CLIL, mainly for secondary level. And the idea is to publish a framework of competencies and a curriculum which should be flexible enough to take into account various different teacher training contexts and educational settings. And what I attended, there were different areas of teacher education which were decided on, and the conference then offered various different workshops on these different areas, and the areas were context and culture, cooperation and reflection, cooperation between subject teachers and language teachers, an area where teacher education has to come up with ideas and material is evaluation and assessment. And again, that was debated in a very heated atmosphere, what the relationship between subject knowledge and language ability was, or should be. Interaction was another one, and that was really interesting because it came up with similar ideas like John's 2 documents, which you uploaded onto our website, then multimodal teaching, looking at other ways of communicating, not only through language but through pictures and symbols and graphs and tables and things like that.
Yeah.
Area number 6 was needs of learners, and the learners in terms of teacher trainees. So to pay attention to their experiences, their language levels and their needs. Then the area of planning, because CLIL requires more planning. Planning in terms of moving from less or fewer language demands to more language demands in a CLIL lesson. And lastly, teaching subject literacies, in other words, text types and language patterns which are typical for a particular subject like history or geography or chemistry or whatever. And that was really, really interesting. And the idea, the idea is that by September, coming September, the people in charge of the project want to finish their final report and come up with a definitive version of materials and products in the form of a portfolio. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Can I just ask about that, Pete? But the theme of the meeting wasn't specifically CLIL, was it? It just sounds that your report back on what happened was very full of CLIL-related themes, and yet the meeting itself was more broad than...
Well, the meeting itself was basically called CLIL Across Context, a scaffolding framework for teacher education, and they started off introducing the concept of these 8 areas where they think that a teacher training concept or so should focus on, and then there was a kind of a broad introduction by Dieter Wolf, German professor, retired professor, about curriculum development. And then afterwards we went into, Thursday evening we were given some talks by Luxembourg teachers, secondary school teachers in Luxembourg who do teach their subjects in CLIL. They were all subject teachers, not language teachers. And the languages were predominantly German, French and English. And the examples were examples of real CLIL. And then on Friday the workshops were on teacher training for CLIL teachers. And the interesting thing was that the focus was on CLIL teachers, not language teachers teaching content or subject teachers teaching language. It was sort of a model for a CLIL teacher.
So would you say, in short, that the identity of a CLIL profile for a teacher is alive and kicking at an event like that? Because I think that has been one of the issues in the past, that teachers regularly identifying themselves with a CLIL label hasn't happened that much. Would you say that was the case there?
Yeah, that's true. I think the ultimate idea is that there is going to be a sort of I don't know whether you can call it a manual for teacher training, but certainly a concept which takes into account that at the moment we've got to start from people who are being trained as subject teachers or language teachers, or in a better world for both. And of course Luxembourg is an excellent spot because it's such a small country and there are so many different languages being spoken there, so that any teacher who is trained in Luxembourg is automatically bi or trilingual.
Yes, what's the name of the project?
It's called CLIL Across Contexts, and there's a website which is www.clil.uni.lu.
Okay. I'll post that in our notes.
If you go there, you will find some documents related to the project, and as I said, I'm looking forward to looking at the final outcome.
Great. Well, I'll post that in our notes and the write-up on the website. Just for a moment, let me stop our discussion and say welcome to Sabina, who has quietly joined us, and for the first time, welcome, Sabina.
Hello, welcome to all. Thanks a lot.
And we so far, let me just introduce you. We have Cristiana and Lauretta from Italy, and we have Pete Richman from Switzerland. We also have Lubov, who's with us quietly, but I'm not sure if she'll participate because she has something at home she has to deal with. But she asked that we include her as a silent partner. And I'm still trying to contact Lida, who is online in Holland, but not picking up her phone. Sabina is our colleague from Germany, from the Kassel region, I think, Sabina. Maybe you could tell us just a quick few words about yourself.
Yes, hello. My name is Sabine Sauerwein, and I'm a teacher. I'm not a language teacher for English, but I'm a teacher for biology and religion. And I have here from this group from Expert Weisheit from Kassel, and I'm interested in school that I can learn with the teaching biology project and make some works with them. And I hope my favorite or my improving is that my English works better, and I hope that I can enjoy pupils to speak English in biology language.
Are you teaching your subjects to English at the moment, Sabina? Are you teaching biology and religious studies in English? Yeah.
Yes, at the moment I have a biology project in genetics, and this is for pupils. They are 16 years old, and we have some information in German language and some in English, and that's a mix.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we do have a little bit of an agenda, Sabina and colleagues. We put together this introductory moment, reporting back from certain contexts, and I don't know how you all feel, but I think that's a really good idea. If we have a few minutes at the beginning to give a bit of feedback on any events we've attended, it's very useful to have that recorded, because then I can make links to relevant websites for people who might like to go and have a look. We might make that a standard slot at the beginning of our discussions, if you agree.
Yes, it's a good idea.
Fine.
I think that.
Well, the other two issues that I thought from your suggestions we could talk about were questions. There has been interest from colleagues in the group about talking about questions in the classroom, and then the other part that I suggested might make sense is if we try and relate that to training. Now, if you like, let's make a start on questions in the CLIL classroom and questions in the classroom generally, because I think from experience we may get carried away, we may hit a dead end, and I've got a few things I can contribute with from my own preparation. Lauretta, I remember in a past discussion you raised this area as one of particular interest.
Yes,
Would you tell
I
us?
raised it because I think this is a crucial point, because questions form is generally affects the way you run a lesson, and therefore it affects how you train teachers to run a lesson, because you know that in the theoretical framework about questions forming, you have a different way of categorizing questions, like display questions, for example, which is the most common way of questioning in the class, in a classroom. But if CLIL the CLIL lesson has to become a real interactional environment or opportunity for students, for learners. I mean, what kind of questions form have we to use more frequently, or this is the first question we could discuss, or more?
Well, can I rephrase that, Loretta, and then come back in with the end of your comment? I'm writing notes as you speak, and I will write up where we go with the discussion for our notes as well. And Loretta's just mentioned the display question, and I mean, paraphrasing that, a kind of question which is really where the answer is already known. I suppose that would be a definition of a display question. And the question is, do we need to alter the dialogue, the language within a CLIL classroom if it's going to be the environment where learners are making the most of the language opportunities? Is that what you're saying, Loretta?
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Finish your thought.
No. This was actually the point, because this is the most frequent kind of question, display questions. Anyway, I think everywhere, most countries I visited, this is till today the most common kind of question.
I can chip in with do tell me to shut up, Loretta, if I annoy you with my interruption.
No.
I've been reading again Christiane Dalton Puffer's book, Discourse in Content and Language Integrated Learning, and she has a whole chapter on questions. And to put your comment in context, from her survey of hundreds of classrooms, the display question appears over 90% of all the questions presented are display questions.
If I might just quickly come in here, in my teacher training, which includes CLIL elements, but it's basically a sort of a teacher training trying to get the students used to the concept of communicative language teaching. I'm trying to discourage my students from using too many display questions, and I'm trying to encourage them to use more genuine or real questions. The idea behind it is to try and avoid making students bored, because why should I answer the teacher? He or she already knows the answer. Whereas if a teacher asks a real question, it shows interest in the pupil. Probably what happens when you apply that to a CLIL context is that we would have to operate more with so-called concept questions than real questions if we focus on concepts. I don't know whether you agree, Pete.
More with concept questions, Pete. Can you give us an example what you're thinking of when you say concept questions?
Well, a concept question would be a question which tries A, to avoid translation, and B, sets, let's say, vocabulary or so into a context. So, for example, if you introduce the word dome, you try and put it into context by asking where or who uses dough in his or her daily life, what is dough made of, and stuff like that.
Sure.
I think it's something which revolves around content, and subject teachers have been using concept questions for decades, I guess.
Sure. I mean, the one thing that occurred to me in thinking about this area and reading the Dalton Puffer chapter again is we have an ideal opportunity in a classroom where there is content in a foreign language to use what the teacher says for opportunities for giving models of accurate utterances and accurate statements. And I think the main problem with questions I remember from my own training as a language teacher was where teachers, in using WH questions, actually invert verb forms and present learners with a model which may be confusing for them. And I think in the CLIL context, it may be a question of trying to avoid certain question forms in order to present a more accessible model of the kind of language teachers would like their learners to produce. Do you see what I'm saying? That if I ask the question, what are the main features of a plant cell, and then students have to answer this question, they have to turn my sentence around to put the word order in a way which will produce an accurate statement. And we can avoid that area by making a statement instead of a question.
Yeah.
The teacher can actually give the sentence in the statement as a prompt, and that's not covered in the Dalton Puffer chapter about questions, where the teacher may get the same product from the student without actually asking a question. Tell me about, tell me what you know about, rather than asking a question.
Yeah. And that's what in Cardiff, Hugo Batten's Beersmore, he referred to that as CLIL being able to deliver immediate payoff or reward, because it's sort of communication here and now, and not learning to communicate in 10 years' time when you go and visit an English-speaking country.
I think, going back to your comments about training, Pete, it may be that we as trainers may have a job to do. We may have some analysing of the language to do, to be able to talk to teachers about these techniques and equip them with the kind of language and techniques that may draw them away from display questions. It may be that we ask them to avoid them entirely as a practice lesson and see how they get on.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing is the difficulty that our trainees have probably all had lots of experience of traditional ways of asking questions, and these experiences are very, very difficult to sort of abandon in favour of something new.
But one of the comments about that, which is related to what Peter's just said, I actually feel from reading the Dalton Puffer book that, without saying it, that Dalton Puffer's suggesting that questions are used in a way which is more to do with classroom management than it is to do with language development and finding out what learners know and don't know. And the questions from the teacher are more about directing the lesson and focusing the lesson than they are about where CLIL is concerned, developing language and investigating what learners know and getting them to talk. I don't know how you feel about that. It's quite a big thing to say, perhaps.
Yes, I think that of course it's not necessary to give up all kind of display questions because they are somewhat old-fashioned. Just use it from time to time when it is necessary. And maybe it is important also to change actually the approach to teaching, or to develop a more task-based approach in which the learners, more than answering to a questioner, to ask themselves questions. To interact among one with the other and with the teacher. So the teacher is just one of the possible, subjects of the interaction. And this is also another possibility, to enrich. I'm not the one who say, all the old things are to be cancelled. I mean, sometimes you need a display question, but you have to enrich in the lesson with a mixture of different kind of activities, and of which, of course, questioning is one of the many. And of course, if the one who questions are the students or the learner instead of the teachers, this is already a big change, I think.
Yes, I think you're right, Loretta. In a way, what we're suggesting is, if the teacher has a rich repertoire of activities, they can create the kind of language from the students in a way which is possibly much better than traditional questions and answers. And that may be pair work. It might be some kind of activity where there's an information gap, for example, which means that students have to talk in order to find the information. So, I mean, I agree entirely with that, Loretta. I think the focus on questions is not necessarily the best focus for talking about language production, is it? If I may give a quick bullet point list of some of the areas that Dalton Puffer lists in her chapter on question forms, she focuses in her typology of questions. There's a large area which are questions for facts, simple questions with answers that everybody knows, and they happen a lot in her survey. There are questions for explanations, questions for reasons, questions for opinions, and then questions for metacognitive knowledge. And those three in the middle, explanations, reasons, and opinions, I think are the kinds of questions that we could quite easily turn into tasks where the learners are asking the questions themselves and are maybe following an information gap, for want of a better example, to produce more language than the teacher can easily draw out of the students with simple questions and answers. Explanations, reasons, and opinions.
And I think what they also are higher order questions. They don't simply focus on facts where there's a clear-cut yes or no, or giving of information. It goes into sort of the area of providing personal information, like stating your opinion or so, and giving arguments why you think a certain thing is as it is or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think there is also somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, I read about a further distinction between convergent and divergent question. That is to say, display questions are only convergent. I mean, there is only one possible answer. Instead, this opinion, interpretation, and personalized questions are divergent. I mean, they involve a degree of personal involvement, of personal explanation, and so on.
Sure.
Yeah, and they're open questions, not closed ones.
There's a term, referential questions, which I think applies to what you're describing. And you can imagine where students are asked if any of them had ever been to visit a volcano, and then to explain the experience. The teacher doesn't know the answer to that question, and it relies entirely on knowledge that only the students hold themselves.
Exactly, yes. And of course this is a way also to activate learners' experience and any kind of learning that they experience in a non-formal context, for example.
And it also sends out a strong signal to the learner that the teacher is actually interested in what he's got to say or she has to say, which means it's real communication.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly the case. I mean, there are a couple of other things to say about the open-closed division of questions. That Butter's research suggests actually that what may look like an open question is actually a closed question, and her conclusion is that the reality of questions in the classroom is much more complicated than the simple descriptions we give to them. And there's this issue of teachers using questions for managing the process of a lesson. A hidden closed question that looks like an open question, and I'll think of an example of that in a moment. The other issue that I think we've come up ourselves is the teacher may have other more efficient and successful ways of producing content and language from the learners, and I think that's our aim, isn't it, to get the learners to produce what they know and in a language that they can in the classroom. Those three areas, I think, are issues that are really important to state, because otherwise the traditional approach to the lesson, the teacher-led lesson with questions and answers, stands alone without really being questioned, and in a CLIL context we can't allow that to happen. You know, we have to focus on what gets the learners to produce what they know, and in a language that they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And it is, of course, a way of active learning, and that is highly motivating for the students.
Yeah, I mean, active learning, we haven't talked at all really about what these alternatives are. It may be useful for us to list a few, like, I mean, project work. You can imagine learners creating their own investigations within small groups where they're obliged to use the target language for certain purposes. Maybe they have the feedback, their discussion to the whole class. So small group discussions for a project investigation. It may be sorry, Pete, go ahead.
I guess any form of task-based learning where students are sort of looking or completing tasks which requires them to use language in order to solve a problem or discuss an issue or whatever, and then come up with a solution or sort of a group result, a product which they have to present. I'm specifically thinking of Jane Willis's framework of task-based learning. We're trying to adapt that to English as a foreign language lesson here in our area. Yeah. I think you can use that for any kind of learning, including CLIL.
Yeah. Perhaps Sabina, would you mind saying a few things about your opinion on this? We might be getting stuck in an area that's only exciting for linguists, and I know we've got your biology and religious studies background, which might be useful as well. You know, what's your opinion about the issue we're discussing? On, in a way, we're kind of criticising a little bit teacher-led lessons, where the questions come from the teacher and the answers come from the learners, and maybe a lot of the knowledge is already known by the teacher.
Yeah. My problem in the moment is first, or the important thing in my lesson is the content biology, and I have some materials, text materials in the original English language, and there's not so much there are not so much to talk about in the moment. They're more reading the text and translate this, and then they give a presentation after them from this project. And if I hear from your old project, then it's you talk in your English language, and that's my dream that I can do this in the future.
Yeah.
But I'm not so in the moment with my class.
So are your students preparing short presentations based on projects which they give in English in the classroom?
Yeah.
And what sorts of themes are you using with them, Sabina? What sorts of topics are they doing their project work on?
The topics from this biology project is the history of genetics, gene food, and embryology, and something like this. And they are immer short, special materials, and then they can take with these materials and make them a presentation. That's all. That's the reason why I want to learn more, because I feel you make so wonderful things with your people in English, and I will learn this also, that and make something better for my people.
And are you familiar with? I know Egbert, for example, does a lot of work with Science Across the World in his school. Are you familiar with that project also? Science Across the World. Do you know the project Science Across the World?
No.
It's a project which I'll include in our notes, because the way the project gets the students to carry out their own investigations is by using questionnaires, which is related to our theme of discussion now. But the questionnaires are not from the teacher; they're from a sheet of paper. You know, they're a blank questionnaire for the students to use as a focus in their small groups. And I think the idea we've agreed of a group of students working on a project and then feeding back and presenting to the class may produce a lot more language than can be developed by a teacher with simple display questions.
Mm-hmm.
Sabina, can I ask you a question? From what you've just said, you give your students text in English which they have to read and understand, and then they've got to give presentations. Are these presentations given in German or in English?
Or in English.
In English.
Then we have a team teaching with an English teacher and with a teacher for biology. And when they are older, when you have a project and the students are 17 or 18 years old, then it's my part, the part from the biology part, and the English part from the English teacher. And we want to try it at school, that we can train that younger persons in their 10 or 12 years old, that we can start earlier to read English texts and make a little workbook in English to learn more English step by step.
I see. So it's receptive and productive use of foreign language based on content. Yeah. Thank you.
And what about your religious studies class, Sabina? Do they have the same project work basis there as well? Do the students carry out projects in English in their religious studies class? Yeah.
And that's, at school we have a plan that we must take some content, special content in biology. This content we try to teach with English text and a little bit in English.
I see. And is this content your choice? I mean, is there a compulsory component? Is it from the curriculum that you have to teach anyway if you did it in German, and you choose and you can choose whichever you like to do in English?
That's the curriculum from biology, and some parts of them we have taken English.
I see.
So genetic and health and animals for the youngest persons at the beginner classes.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you do team teaching, so the subject teacher, biology teacher, and the English teacher, is that for the whole time or only for a shorter period of time when you work on projects?
No, that's only for projects, because we have 8 hours for a short project, and then we have team teaching, and after them we have the class alone again.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's a shame we don't have Egbert and Jens with us, because I know my colleagues Pete and Laretta and Christiana are all very interested in listening to what goes on in your classroom, Sabina, you know, and I'll find out from Egbert what the problem was. I'm sure he'll join us for the next meeting, and it certainly is. It means our discussions are much richer when we have contributions from subject teachers. So thanks for coming to join us, Sabina. Listen, let me draw you back to our original agenda, because it's 5 to the hour now, and we've had quite a good discussion on questions, and I'll write up our notes and make some references to some of the source materials like the Dalton Puffer book and the questionnaires. I can actually put some of the sample questionnaires from Science Across on the website as well. But in our agenda we've got the question of training and working with CLIL teachers in a training context. What sort of things would you suggest we could change, we would have to change, bearing in mind our discussion on questions in the classroom, or things that you're already doing with teachers in a training context which are reflected by what we've said about questions? Am I clear? I sometimes get a bit abstract, don't I, when I'm trying to express a question. I think in a way I'm trying to link our discussion to a training context, you know, and how...
Yeah. I think I do understand completely what you want to say. Basically, the issue of questions in a foreign language classroom or in a CLIL classroom is something which I just very briefly look at with my trainees. I usually have 12 and 90-minute sessions per term, and I've got my trainees for 3 terms, and that's all. So the issue of asking questions, whether it's display questions or consult questions or real genuine questions or whatever, I sort of deal with that at a very abstract level. When I go and observe my students when they're on teaching practice, that is something that is much more helpful, because then I can refer to concrete examples and show or look at the way that they ask questions with their students, and then refer it to what we've been briefly looking at during the theoretical sessions. So it's because of lack of time, something which, although I do understand, or I do acknowledge that it's an important issue, is maybe not given enough time in my training context.
One of the things I was going to suggest, thinking about John Clegg's documents, which I put on the website, Language for Classroom Management and Supportive Teacher Talk, in a way what we need is a document like this, but which is subject specific, which, for example, for maths, you know, I know from recent personal experience, maths teachers almost always have something visual to refer to when they're conversing with students, when they're interacting with students. They're referring to a triangle, or they're referring to a problem in the book, or, do you know what I mean? So the language comes from something else apart from just the teacher's question. And I think that we might have a job to do in CLIL, that we might need to analyse the discourse of questions and provide semi-scripts for teachers that follow the patterns of questioning and the patterns of productive language from students.
Yeah, too true. I think the important thing is that that's where subject teachers can contribute a lot. It would have to start off with subject teachers being involved in drawing up lists of questions or subject-related language in general. I like John's list, the language for classroom management, and that is something which I use in my training. But it's not subject related. It is more classroom management, which can be used in any subject actually.
Yes, but I think that this is actually the point, because I don't think that the CLIL teacher is a completely new profile, but it is a profile that has to integrate many skills that are nowadays required to any kind of teachers. And I think that class management is a very important issue. For any teachers, and of course CLIL teachers is one of the more challenging profile of teachers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm writing some notes there, sorry for being quiet, and I think Lauretta has hit onto something which I personally agree wholeheartedly with, that we're not suggesting really that the CLIL teacher is a revolutionary at all. What we are suggesting is that the CLIL teacher needs to have everything very efficiently at their fingertips and very quickly available to them, and that means the language and the tasks and the techniques, they need to work very quickly and efficiently, don't they, Loretta?
Yeah.
Okay, listen, I'm aware of the time, and it's now 7 o'clock here, and despite a few technical hiccups at the beginning, it's been very interesting. We've covered a lot with our really 3 areas: feeding back, questions in the classroom. We may want to come back to questions actually, because I think one of the little tasks I'll give myself is to try to produce something subject specific along the lines of John's document, Language for Classroom Management, and I might try and do it for maths or science and see how I get on with it, collaborating with a science colleague or a math colleague I've got here. And I'll come back to you when we've done that. So we may want to come back, because there is an area that relates to training, isn't there, that we can use the subject teacher's knowledge to feed into possible needs of other colleagues which are in a training context for looking at questions and supporting learner language in their content classroom. So we may come back to that. The other thing I think we might want to come back to, because we talked about it before everybody was in, is this assessment question.
I think that's very, very important.
Yes, very important.
Sooner or later we've got to come back.
I think we should, I think we have to take the bull by the horns.
Yes.
And give it a go.
Anyway, your suggestion about, or you mentioning the Dalton Cooper's book, I went and ordered it today, so
okay.
I'll come updated next time.
Yeah, it's a good book. I mean, what you'll find there is a lot of classroom-based examples. Literally recordings and transcriptions from hundreds of lessons. I think actually specifically for questions, there's about 500 minutes of lessons.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It is very useful. It's a very good place to start. And I'm trying to do my own. I mean, if I can get into my college classrooms and record them to create surveys of language for different purposes in lessons, whether it be for vocabulary, whether it be for question forms, and it's a very good way of starting off a discussion about these areas. So let's draw our conversation to a close, and I'll post our summary of discussion, as well as some other ideas like these, like assessment and like, you know, specific scripts for certain subjects for specific purposes like questions, and also some dates, and then you can get back to me about what's best for you and most appropriate.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, fine, thanks very much.
Fine.
Thanks for joining us again. It always is very rich and very useful. And thanks for joining us, Sabina, and sharing your experience.
Okay.
Thank you, bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.